What if I told you thousands of Americans are celebrating Christmas this year without rent, without debt, and without spending more than a few $100s, and it's completely legal? While the malls are packed and credit cards are maxing out, a quiet movement is happening across the country as families, retirees, and everyday people pack up and move somewhere cheaper just to survive the holidays. Not to vacation, not to flex, but to breathe. Because this year's Christmas isn't about gifts anymore. It's about heat, food, safety, and not waking up to an eviction notice. And the places people are moving to aren't the ones you see on postcards. They're towns where rent is still low, groceries are manageable, and survival doesn't feel like a luxury. And once you see where these Americans are going and why, you'll understand why so many people say Christmas exposed the real cost of living in America. So if this video opens your eyes even a little, do me a quick favor. Tap like so more people who need this can find it. Drop a comment telling me where you think America is still affordable or where you're thinking of moving, and subscribe because this channel exists to help you make smarter choices about where and how to live, especially when times get hard. Section 1. Where Americans are moving. Let's start with the big question. Where are Americans actually going to survive Christmas on low income? I'm not talking about vacation hotspots or Instagram-perfect towns. I'm talking about places where families can heat their homes, put food on the table, and actually sleep without worrying about eviction notices. Across the country, we're seeing a quiet exodus, and it's happening in regions you might never have guessed. People aren't moving to coastlines with fancy beaches, and they're not flocking to high-rise apartments in expensive cities. No, they're moving to the southern interior, where rent is still reasonable and utilities don't drain your entire paycheck. They're heading to the Midwest, where small towns hide affordable housing gems, and the winters, while cold, don't crush people with insane heating bills. And surprisingly, some are even heading to the desert Southwest, where winter is mild and heating costs are practically zero. Here's the catch. Within each of these regions, the exact towns are secret to most outsiders. People keep them quiet because once word spreads, rent goes up and the affordability disappears. But today, I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain. In the southern interior, think states like Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas. Here you can find homes or apartments for $400 to $800 per month. Families are choosing to live here because even in December, heating a small home won't cost more than $100 a month. And groceries for a family of 4 can stay under $300 per week if you shop smart. Move a little north into the Midwest, in states like Ohio, Indiana, and Missouri, and you'll see similar patterns. Some towns have populations under 20,000 people, but the infrastructure is still solid. Schools are open, groceries are accessible, and community networks help make life manageable. Rent here can be as low as $300 a month for a modest apartment, and even small houses often go for $500 a month or less. Imagine celebrating Christmas in a town where your monthly housing costs don't swallow your paycheck. It changes everything. Then there's the desert Southwest. Think Arizona and New Mexico. People are parking RVs, renting small houses, or joining tight-knit communities where monthly living costs rarely exceed $800. Winter here is mild, so heating is minimal, and that alone can save hundreds of dollars over the holiday season. Some retirees, young families, and even single adults are making this move just to survive December. Now you might be asking, why haven't we heard about these places before? The answer is simple. They're quiet, overlooked, and under the radar. No one covers them in travel magazines because they're not glamorous. But for people trying to survive Christmas, these towns are gold. And here's a tip. People don't just move anywhere in these regions. They look for small towns near bigger cities. You get the best of both worlds, affordable rent and easy access to services, groceries, and medical care. It's a strategy that doesn't make headlines, but makes survival possible. But the most surprising trend, even in traditionally expensive states, some Americans are finding ways to live cheaply by relocating to rural outskirts, small communities, or shared housing. They may work remotely or freelance, but the key is that they aren't tied to high rent or traditional jobs. And in 2026, this is becoming more common than ever. Here's what's critical to understand. These moves aren't temporary vacations. They're life-saving decisions. Families are planning months in advance, researching every utility cost, every grocery store, even local traffic and climate, to make sure they can survive December without financial collapse. And some have learned the hard way. If you wait too long, you can't move, because affordable options disappear fast. Later in this video, I'll give you specific towns in each region where rent is low, survival costs are manageable, and Christmas doesn't feel like a financial nightmare. But for now, keep this in mind. The movement isn't about luxury, convenience, or Instagram photos. It's about heat, food, shelter, and peace of mind. And before we move to the next section, think about this. What would you do if your Christmas depended on the city, town, or state you live in? Would you pack up and leave? Stick around because the towns we're about to show you might surprise you, and they could change how you see survival in America forever. Section 2. Why Christmas changes everything. Christmas is supposed to be the happiest time of the year. For millions of Americans, it's anything but. For some, December feels like a pressure cooker that slowly squeezes your bank account dry. Bills don't stop for the holidays. Rent doesn't pause. Utilities climb higher just when you can least afford it. Grocery stores raise prices for the season, and suddenly feeding a family of 4 costs $300 to $400 a week. Sometimes more if you want a normal holiday dinner. And it's not just about money. The stress hits everywhere. People working 2 or 3 jobs feel like they can't breathe. Parents try to keep smiles on their kids' faces while wondering how they'll cover heating, rent, and Christmas presents all at once. Even the simplest things like going to a grocery store or filling up the gas tank become small crises when every penny counts. By the 3rd week of December, the panic is real. Millions of Americans are running out of money before the month is over. Here's the thing. Christmas exaggerates problems that have been simmering all year. High-rent states feel the crunch the most. In cities like New York, Los Angeles, or San Francisco, the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment is $2,000 a month or more. Add heating bills, groceries, transportation, and you're looking at over $3,000 just to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. For people making minimum wage or relying on fixed income, that math doesn't work. It never has. Meanwhile, holiday expectations pile on top. Families feel pressured to buy gifts, decorate, attend events, or travel to see loved ones. Credit card statements skyrocket, and suddenly Christmas becomes a financial marathon, not a celebration. And here's the thing that nobody talks about: the mental and emotional toll. Americans are stressed, anxious, and in many cases isolated because money problems take over the joy of the season. It gets worse. Some families try to stretch every dollar, skipping meals, delaying bills, or borrowing from family or friends just to make it through December. And while stores are packed with cheerful shoppers and flashing lights, the reality for many is stark. 40% of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $1,000 emergency. That's 4 out of every 10 people struggling through the holidays. Even for those who make it work, there's a cost. Relationships strain, sleep disappears, anxiety dominates every conversation. And for people who rely on Social Security, disability, or small fixed incomes, the holidays aren't a celebration at all. They're a countdown to financial collapse. Heating bills, medical co-pays, and groceries all add up, and by December 25th, what should feel like joy often feels like exhaustion. That's why Christmas has become a breaking point for Americans choosing to move. When rent is high, utilities spike, and food costs surge, people start asking themselves, where can I live where I don't have to choose between heat and dinner? And that question drives the exodus we saw in Section 1. It's not about luxury, it's about survival. Think about it. Every year, millions of Americans look at their paychecks and expenses in December and realize the math doesn't add up. You can either go deeper into debt or find a place where $1,000 can cover rent, utilities, and groceries for the entire month. That decision alone is life-changing. And while the media shows cheerful holiday stories, behind closed doors, Americans are quietly making choices that determine whether they survive the season financially and emotionally. Even for middle-class households, Christmas is revealing cracks. Families who were fine throughout the year suddenly feel stretched too thin. Heating a home for a family of 5 in the Midwest can cost $200 a month. And in the South, electricity can jump $50 to $100 more just for holiday lighting and seasonal cooking. It all adds up fast. And the stress isn't just numbers, it's mental energy, worry, tension at family gatherings, and sleepless nights wondering how to make the month work. That's why the movement isn't just about low-rent towns. It's about timing, planning, and escaping the holiday financial pressure before it crushes you. People move early December, sometimes even November, to lock in affordable options. They look for small towns where heating and food costs are manageable, groceries don't double, and rent isn't more than half of their monthly income. They want Christmas to feel like a season, not a survival exercise. And here's the kicker. The choices Americans make during Christmas now ripple into the rest of the year. Surviving December often determines whether they can make it through winter, whether kids get clothes, whether bills stay paid. Christmas is no longer just a holiday. For many, it's a financial litmus test, showing where life is manageable and where it's not. So when you think about Americans moving to survive the holidays, don't picture luxury escapes. Picture real families making hard, smart decisions, families who know that spending $1,000 wisely in December means freedom, warmth, and a little peace of mind. And keep watching, because in the next section, we're going to dive into who exactly is moving and how they're making it work, from retirees to single parents, from city workers to rural pioneers, and the strategies they're using to survive Christmas without breaking the bank. Section 3. Who is moving, how they're doing it. Now that we've seen where Americans are moving, let's talk about who is actually making these moves and how they're doing it. This isn't some abstract statistic. These are real people living real lives, making choices that affect their families, their holidays, and their survival. First, retirees on fixed incomes. Imagine someone living on $1,000 a month from Social Security. That might cover rent and utilities in some towns, but it's impossible in cities like Boston, Los Angeles, or Miami. So retirees are heading to small towns in the South or Midwest where rent is $400 to $600 a month. Groceries are affordable, and local communities still offer support. Some are buying small homes outright, using savings to eliminate rent completely. Others are downsizing from a 3-bedroom house to a tiny apartment or even an RV parked in a quiet, low-cost town. Then there are single parents working multiple jobs, trying to make ends meet. For them, December is brutal. Utilities spike, groceries cost more, holiday expenses pile on, and childcare continues even when school is out. These parents are relocating to towns where monthly living costs drop by half, often joining shared housing or small communities to split rent and bills. Some move hundreds of miles, sometimes across state lines, for a chance to survive Christmas without sinking into debt. Next, young adults and freelancers. They don't have families yet, but they do have bills. Many are digital workers who can move anywhere with internet. They're choosing rural or suburban towns with cheap rent and strong connectivity. Some are renting small apartments for $300 to $500 a month and using the money they save to build up emergency funds. For them, the choice is simple. Sacrifice the nightlife and big city glamour for a stable December. Disabled Americans and those on disability income are another major group. They are often on fixed monthly payments that barely cover basic living costs. Some of them are moving to desert towns or rural Midwest areas where heating, groceries, and transportation are affordable and medical facilities are accessible. For these people, relocation isn't optional. It's about survival, safety, and maintaining independence. Now, here's a secret most outsiders don't see. People aren't just moving randomly. They're strategically choosing towns where a combination of factors align. They look at rent prices, utility costs, grocery availability, transportation, and climate. And they plan their move months in advance. They even consider things like local food pantries, seasonal employment opportunities, and community support networks. This is data-driven survival, and it's quietly reshaping entire regions. Some families are getting creative. For example, a single mother in Chicago told me she moved to Arkansas, where her rent dropped from $1,200 a month to just $450. She now has enough money for groceries, heating, and a small Christmas celebration for her kids, a luxury she couldn't afford in the city. Another retiree sold a small condo in New York, bought a tiny house in Mississippi outright for $35,000, and now has extra money for heating, food, and medical bills. No mortgage, no stress. Even couples without children are making moves. They might rent a small apartment in a quiet Midwest town for $500 a month, work remotely, and spend December stress-free instead of worrying about bills and parking in expensive urban areas. Some even take temporary jobs in these towns during the holiday season just to bridge the gap and stay afloat. But here's the part that keeps this suspenseful. Not all affordable towns are safe or suitable. People have to do deep research. They check crime rates, healthcare access, weather patterns, and transportation options. Many communities seem perfect on paper, but fail in one critical area. Maybe winter heating is too expensive, or the nearest grocery store is 40 miles away. Those missteps can turn a cheap move into a nightmare. So the movers we're talking about are smart, strategic, and resilient. They're not running blindly, they're planning meticulously. Some even visit potential towns multiple times before committing, scouting apartments, talking to locals, and calculating exactly how much money they'll need for rent, utilities, groceries, and holiday costs. And the really interesting part, many of these moves are seasonal. Some people plan to stay for 3 to 6 months during the toughest part of winter, then return if conditions improve. Others relocate permanently because the move gives them freedom and stability they never had before. The common thread is this: every decision revolves around survival, especially during Christmas. If you're watching this and thinking, could I do that? The truth is, almost anyone could if they plan carefully. Whether it's a retiree with limited income, a single parent juggling jobs, or a freelancer seeking stability, the strategies they use are simple in concept but powerful in impact. Reduce rent, lower utility bills, move somewhere affordable, build community, plan ahead, and most importantly, put survival first over status or appearance. And here's the teaser you've been waiting for. In the next section, we'll explore the trade-offs people make. The places are cheap, but nothing is perfect. Some towns have fewer jobs. Some lack healthcare options. Some have long commutes. But for those who move strategically, the trade-offs are worth it, because survival, warmth, and a stress-free Christmas matter more than anything else. Section 4. The trade-offs people accept. Moving somewhere cheap sounds great, right? Low rent, affordable groceries, manageable utilities, maybe even a little extra for Christmas. But here's the truth. Nothing comes without a cost. Every person we just talked about, retirees, single parents, digital workers, disabled Americans, all of them face trade-offs that most outsiders don't see. First, jobs. Affordable towns often mean fewer employment opportunities. If you're moving from a big city, you're leaving behind thousands of companies, high-paying positions, and the hustle of corporate life. People in these towns often work seasonal jobs, freelance gigs, or remote work, but they accept lower wages because the overall cost of living is so much smaller. For some, that's a gamble. For others, it's a necessity. You trade a high paycheck for stability and predictability, and for December, that trade-off can save your Christmas. Then there's healthcare. Small towns or rural areas often have limited access to hospitals, specialists, or urgent care. Retirees on fixed income or people with chronic conditions have to plan meticulously. They choose towns where basic health care is within 30 to 40 minutes, even if it means leaving friends, family, or familiar neighborhoods behind. They accept fewer options because the cost savings outweigh the inconvenience, because staying in an expensive city could mean running out of money for heat, groceries, or rent. Transportation is another trade-off. In many cheap towns, you can't walk to work, groceries, or appointments. Public transit may be non-existent. People rely on cars, and that means longer commutes. Sometimes an hour one way, sometimes more. But they calculate the cost. Gas plus maintenance is far cheaper than paying double rent or moving into a cramped, overpriced apartment in the city. It's a conscious choice. More time driving, less money spent, and for many, the trade-off is worth it. Even lifestyle changes are unavoidable. People moving to survive December often give up the convenience of big city amenities. No trendy restaurants, no movie theaters on every corner, no crowded shopping districts. Instead, they focus on essentials: a safe home, reliable utilities, groceries, and community support. Christmas may be quieter, gifts may be smaller, celebrations may be simpler, but for people struggling to survive, simplicity equals sanity. Climate is another factor. Some retirees move to the desert Southwest to avoid expensive heating bills, but that means sacrificing lush landscapes or winter traditions. Others move to small Midwestern towns where winter is harsh, sometimes with heavy snow, but rent is cheap and groceries are affordable. They accept the cold, the long winters, and the isolation because the financial peace of mind outweighs the discomfort. Community and social life can also be a trade-off. When you move to a small town to survive, you may leave lifelong friends or family behind. Holidays are different. Christmas celebrations may be smaller, less elaborate, or more home-based. But the people who move learn to build new connections, find local support networks, and rely on neighbors. And often, that becomes the most surprising benefit of relocating. Even education is part of the trade-off for families. Some towns have excellent public schools, others don't. Parents may accept schools that are less prestigious or further from home to save hundreds of dollars in rent or utilities. For them, survival and stability in December are more important than rankings or accolades. They're planning for the long term. Survive now, rebuild later. And here's a critical insight. Every trade-off is a calculated risk. People don't just move blindly. They check crime rates, healthcare access, school quality, grocery availability, heating costs, and job opportunities before making the leap. Every decision is deliberate. And because the stakes are highest during the holidays, these decisions feel urgent. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and December becomes a nightmare instead of a manageable month. Some people even share housing with friends or family to cut costs. Others rent tiny homes, studio apartments, or even park RVs in low-cost areas. They accept smaller living spaces, less privacy, and sometimes uncomfortable arrangements because the alternative, staying in a city with unaffordable rent and bills, is far worse. Every sacrifice is weighed against survival, and that's what makes this movement so quiet, yet so powerful. Finally, there's emotional trade-off. Moving during the holidays isn't just physical, it's emotional. People leave familiarity, traditions, and memories behind. They might miss family gatherings, neighborhood Christmas lights, or long-held customs. But what they gain is freedom from financial panic, freedom to heat their home, feed their kids, and enjoy Christmas without fear of being evicted or going hungry. That trade-off, for so many Americans, is priceless. In short, these trade-offs are real. They're difficult. They're emotional, practical, and sometimes uncomfortable. But they're also the choices that allow Americans to survive the holidays. Low rent, manageable bills, and a little peace of mind come at a price, and for millions, it's worth every sacrifice. And if you think that's the end of the story, stick around, because in the next section, we're going to zoom out and explore what all of this says about America itself. How Christmas, high costs, and migration patterns reveal the state of survival in the U.S. in ways most people don't see. It's the bigger picture, and it's both shocking and enlightening. Section 5. What this says about America. When you step back and look at all of this, the towns people are moving to, the retirees, single parents, digital workers, and families making impossible choices, it tells you something profound about America in 2026. It tells you that our country is no longer one size fits all when it comes to survival. For decades, Americans believed that hard work guaranteed stability. Pay your bills, show up on time, go to school, work hard, and life will be fine. But today, that equation is broken. High rent, expensive utilities, inflation, and seasonal costs like Christmas have revealed a hard truth. Survival isn't guaranteed anymore. Look at the movement we've been tracking. Thousands of Americans are quietly leaving high-cost cities, moving to towns they never imagined considering. They're trading opportunity for stability, glamour for peace of mind, big paychecks for predictable monthly costs. This isn't about laziness, it's about adaptation. And here's the reality most people don't see. These moves are reshaping regions. Small towns in the Midwest, the South, and even the desert Southwest are experiencing population shifts that change local economies, schools, and communities. People who were once invisible to the broader economy are now driving demand for housing, groceries, and services, but in a way that keeps their monthly expenses manageable. They're creating survival economies, quietly, intentionally, and strategically. What does this tell us about America as a whole? It tells us that cost of living and financial pressure is redefining where life is livable. Cities that used to be dream destinations, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, are increasingly impossible for middle and lower income Americans to survive in. Meanwhile, overlooked towns once considered boring or unremarkable are now lifelines. The American dream isn't gone, it's just migrating. And there's a deeper truth hidden in all of this. Christmas, as stressful as it is, exposes the cracks in the system. It's the ultimate magnifier. When you see Americans moving hundreds of miles just to keep their families fed, warm, and housed, you realize the system wasn't designed for everyone. It wasn't built to survive high costs, seasonal pressures, or the unpredictability of life. So Americans are creating their own solutions: relocation, downsizing, strategic moves, shared housing. Because survival is more important than appearances. Here's what's inspiring. People aren't just running away from problems. They're learning, adapting, and even thriving in ways most Americans never consider. They're leveraging low-cost housing, affordable utilities, and supportive communities to build financial breathing room. For some, it's temporary, a seasonal escape to survive winter and the holidays. For others, it's permanent, a chance to live without constant stress, without panic, without sacrificing dignity. And while the media loves to show headlines about rising rent, inflation, or economic collapse, it rarely captures the resilience, creativity, and quiet courage of Americans who make these moves. Families who leave everything behind to protect their children, retirees who trade glamour for warmth, freelancers who choose stability over prestige. Every one of them is redefining what it means to survive in modern America. This movement also reveals a hard lesson for all of us. Cheap isn't always easy, and expensive isn't always safe. Living in a high-cost city might look glamorous on Instagram, but for millions, it's a daily fight for survival. A quiet Midwest suburb or a desert community may seem mundane, but it can offer stability, warmth, and peace, priceless during the holidays. So when you step back and connect the dots, Christmas pressures, high rent, migration patterns, trade-offs, survival strategies, what emerges is a new map of America. Not just a map of where people live, but a map of where survival is possible, where families can breathe, where December doesn't destroy them financially or emotionally. And here's the final takeaway. Americans are resilient, adaptable, and strategic. They are proving that when the system fails, they don't give up. They find a way. They relocate. They downsize. They build community. They survive. And in 2026, that quiet migration is shaping the country in ways that are invisible to most, but essential to understand. So, as you think about where you want to live, especially if cost and survival matter, don't just ask how cheap a place is. Ask, can I live there without fear? Can I survive December without sacrificing my family, my dignity, or my peace of mind? Because in America today, those are the questions that define real freedom. And that's the bigger picture. Christmas may be the season of cheer, but for millions of Americans, it's also the season that reveals the truth. Where you live matters more than you ever imagined. And knowing where, how, and why people are moving is the key to understanding not just survival, but the future of American life itself.